In the context of testing, what do the terms manual testing and automated testing actually mean or represent? Some people argue that manual testing implies repetitive, low-skill work, when in reality it involves critical thinking, analysis, investigation, and risk assessment. Testers engage in exploratory testing, problem-solving, and strategic planning, making the term manual misleading. It's mostly thought work. Testing has never been purely manual. Tools have always assisted testing efforts in some way or other. That is, automated testing is not fully automated anyway. So where does this leave us? Do the terms automated and manual serve as any useful purpose anymore? The term automated testing suggests that testing can run independently of human intervention, which is not accurate. Automation requires human creativity, analysis, test design or selection, programming and program maintenance to be effective. Many argue that automated testing should more accurately be called automated test execution, since testing overall is a more wide-ranging cognitive task. If you remember the new model, of the 10 thinking activities, automation only really supports the applying activity. Some tools might support partly the interpretation and reporting aspects. The early test automation tool vendors such as Mercury, SQA, Segway, who promoted their products by contrasting automation with manual testing, may have started the automated versus manual dichotomy. The terminology may have stuck because of marketing, but also testers use the terms on their resumes and HR job description use them too. It's often the case that automation roles are better paid than those labelled as manual tester roles, encouraging the misconception that automation is superior in some way. These labels devalue the role of exploratory, risk-based and structured or analytical testing, which are the critical testing styles essential to assure all types of systems. It's been suggested that rather than automated versus manual, we should use different dichotomies to emphasise cognitive and strategic aspects rather than execution methods. For example, exploratory testing versus scripted testing, human-led testing versus tool-assisted testing, cognitive testing versus autonomous testing, experiential testing versus programmatic testing. Are these ways of looking at testing helpful, or do they simply emphasise methodology styles or variations in logistics? Why do we need to differentiate between the two styles at all? The recent buzz around AI-driven testing blurs the line further, making distinctions between manual and automated less relevant. Some folks suggest terms like AI-assisted testing are needed, rather than maintaining perspectives from a bygone age. The consensus seems to be that the terms manual and automated testing are outdated, misleading, and limit the profession. Many advocate for a shift in language to better reflect the intellectual and strategic contribution of testers. It's a big challenge to change ingrained industry terminology, but many believe it's a battle worth fighting. This debate also highlights an ongoing effort to ensure software testing is recognised as a skilled, intellectual profession rather than just an execution-based task. The terms manual versus automated may not be helpful, but the word versus is completely out of place. For many years I've advocated we look at testing from two standpoints. Firstly, how we think about testing, and secondly, how we choose to manage the logistics of testing. You could say thinking is the strategy and logistics are tactics, but this sounds a bit pretentious to me. If we separate our thinking from the practical aspects of how we perform the activities of testing, we can deal with the logistics in a more sensible way. Firstly, in general, a test is designed by a human. Maybe the humans use a tool, Word, Excel, or code. Python programming language might help. Now, this test could be a simple idea, or it could be a 50-page document describing a comprehensive procedure to implement an end-to-end test in a complicated environment. I don't care. The thought process is the same. The thoughts themselves, the content and scale of tests can be very different, obviously. Whether we execute a test with tools or manually or by some other chosen piece of magic is irrelevant if we consider the thought process as universal. What are the logistics of applying tests? Well, this can include preparing environments, managing test data, running tests, validating results, analysing outputs or results data, cleaning up environments, and so on. How we achieve these things are the logistical choices that we make based on many contextual influences. Many tasks can only be done manually, that is, using our brains, pencil, paper, whiteboard, or other aids to capture our ideas, test cases, whatever. Or, of course, we might just keep all that information in our heads. Other tasks can only be performed with tools. Every environment, application, stakeholder, goal and risk profiles are different, so we need to make choices on how we actually make the tests happen. Some tests, for example APIs, might be executed using a browser, typing URLs into the search bar, or code, or we could use a specialist dedicated tool. All these approaches require technology. The browser is simply the UI we use to access the APIs. Are these tests manual or are they automated? I hope you can see that it's a spectrum of choices, not an either-or situation. Our actual approach is our choice. The manual versus automated label simply blurs the situation. It's logistics that are the issue, not testing as a whole. Now, I believe there is, at some level of abstraction and with wide variation, a perspicacious thought process for all tests. The choices we make for logistics varies widely depending on our context. You might call this a context-driven approach. I wouldn't call it that. I think all testing is context-driven, so the label is superfluous. Now, you might not like some contexts or the approaches often chosen in those contexts. I don't care. The choice of exploratory testing versus scripted testing is a subjective, perhaps contractual and probably a cultural call. I use the new model to explain why, for example, test execution is not all testing. Automated execution clearly isn't the be-all and end-all. I use the model to explain the nuanced difference between improvised testing and pre-scripted testing. All testing is exploratory is an assumption of the new model. And I use the model to highlight the importance of sources of knowledge, challenging requirements, test modelling and other aspects of testing that are hard to explain in other ways. Like all models, the new model is wrong, but I believe useful. In any discussion of testing where someone says this thing versus that thing, the versus reflects a difference of opinion or personal preferences for their chosen approach. It's not a schism in the testing discipline. Stop using the word versus when you talk about testing. Marketing might be a wrestling match, but testing is not. If you want to know more about the concepts I'm talking about in the Glossary of Terms videos, it will probably help you if you take a look at the Leadership in Tests online class that I created a year or two ago. It covers some of the topics in more detail and obviously provides more of a structured approach to explanations of the concepts, and also gives you some idea of how to do some of the things that I talk about. I hope you can take a look at it and get value out of it. The link is below, bit.ly/leadintest.